And let's get into that. I'm excited to introduce the next moderator, my colleague at Madrona Venture Labs, Jay Bartow. Jay is a technologist and a serial machine learning entrepreneur. He started his first company in the dot-com 90s, and since then has co-founded 5 more venture-backed startups. And over that time, Jay has seen firsthand the ebbs and flows of AI and NLP leading up to the exciting times that we're in now. However, with this new wave of generative, there's also huge challenges, and many of those that were just discussed by Tim and the group, including defensibility, which is top of mind for a lot of people. You know, how do businesses and generative AI companies differentiate and build defensible moats when the underlying LLMs are advancing so quickly and have become so accessible to everyone? And so let me turn it over to Jay to discuss this and a few other topics with a few of the amazing Seattle area entrepreneurs that you see here. Jay, over to you.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate that introduction. Hey, everybody. So welcome to the panel on defensibility. So in this panel, we're going to go deeper on defensibility, but this time get the important perspective of the entrepreneurs. So just a quick preamble here. Defensibility of your idea or startup is a really important topic, both to you and your business, of course, but also to investors. And it's a topic that can be confusing to a lot of new entrepreneurs. And in fact, this has become even a little bit more complicated lately with the introduction of Gen AI. So we're going to dig into all of this. We're going to talk about what's meant by the term defensibility and how to think about a defensibility strategy for your software startup. Before we get started, of course, I want to introduce our esteemed founder panelists, Maria Karavanova, co-founder of Y Labs, Jason Knight, co-founder of Octo AI, and Diego Oppenheimer, co-founder of Algorithmia, and more recently, Guardrails AI and Factory. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Really appreciate you having you here. I wonder if I could ask each of you to provide a brief bio for the listeners. Do you want to start, Maria?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jay. And I caught the tail end of the previous panel. I hope that all the builders you have are taking full advantage of the great advice that I got to hear. And I wish we had had this advice when we were first getting started. By way of introduction, I'm Maria Karavanova. I'm one of the co-founders at Y Labs. We're an AI observability company. My bio spans operating and investing. So I have a mix of startup experience. I was one of the first 20 employees at a startup called Cloudflare, which took off, and I led a bunch of the go-to-market functions there and saw it from 0 to over 100 million in ARR. And thankfully, it IPO'd in 2019. And then I spent time on the investing side. I was at Madrona Ventures and got to know, of course, the venture labs and all the great work that you do. A while there, I was specializing on primarily SaaS and cybersecurity, but then started digging into machine learning and AI. And here I am on the founder side again.
Thanks, Maria. Next up, Diego. Can you go, please?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Diego Oppenheimer. So I'm a managing partner at a pre-seed and seed fund called Factory, where we focus on kind of like pretty deep AI companies. I joined about a year ago. My role is to actually incubate companies. So I sometimes join as an operator. I just recently co-founded a company called Guardrails. Previous to that, I was at the acquirer of my company called Data Robot, where I ran all of machine learning operations. And previous to that, for 7.5 years, I ran my company, which was a deployment and inference company called Algorithmia, kind of in the MLOps space. And that previous to that, I was at Microsoft for 5.5 years, working on product as well. I was on the V1 team of a product called Power BI now, and so which is now a pretty big deal, but at the time was a inception project. So that was pretty cool. So data and analytics and product has been kind of like the last 20 years of my life.
Awesome. Thanks, Diego. And last but not least, Jason Knight.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much. I started my career in the applied ML side. Well, it's actually theory heavy, but building machine learning models, pre-deep learning, classical hierarchical Bayesian models for cancer diagnostics and therapeutics. I did that for a bit in the biotech industry. but realized with the advent of distributed cloud computing, AWS, Kubernetes, that the infrastructure layer was challenging at best, but extremely potent area for innovation in especially for machine learning, where the compute needs are so great. So I joined a startup called Nirvana that was acquired by Intel, spent a few years there doing on both the engineering and product side of things. And from there, just continued to dig in deeper to the ML infra side on the software, especially. And that's where I met the co-founders of our current startup, OctoML, where they were Luis Ceza and a few other students of his at University of Washington were solving some of the deep challenges we had at Intel. And so I started working with them and with my Intel hat on, but realized they had a solution for a much broader swath of the market than just Intel. And so that's where we kicked off OctoML to really work on the ML infra stack, and generative AI was a natural follow on that, of just enabling more folks, more developers to develop generative AI applications.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Great group of entrepreneurs, AI entrepreneurs. So really appreciate you guys being here. So before we talk about defensibility strategies, let's explore the term defensibility and what it means in the context of a software technology startup, because it probably means different things depending on your kind of business and whether you do hardware or other kinds of technologies. So when you pitch to investors or even the judges this Sunday at the Launchable finale, one of the lenses that those judges are going to be viewing your idea through is how defensible the idea is. So put another way, if you're wildly successful or even on track to be successful, how easy will it be for your competitors, both big and small, to copy you and steal your traction, your thunder, your customers, basically your mojo? I think it was mentioned on Monday, sometimes, you'll hear the reaction to an idea, even more so lately with Gen AI. Oh, Google or Amazon or Meta or Microsoft can just build that. So how do you protect your company? So let's give the listeners a little bit of context here, because I think that there's some dramatic examples from the history of software and consumer products and commerce in general, where famous products and companies that lack defensibility their market share was ultimately eroded by competition. So I can think of a few right off the top of my head, but I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. What are companies that come to mind that were riding high at one point and then found themselves in a really bad place when a competitor came along?
I mean, I don't want to name names because I think it's like, who knows, and like, kind of like the future, will tell. But I do think like there's a little bit of a philosophy around this, which is, I think if you are looking at an incumbent or an incumbent space and the only value you're bringing, the way I look at it, is like one standard deviation to the right or one standard deviation to the left, whatever you want to like talk about, because you're adding some non-proprietary piece of AI, I think it's very hard to make a defensible, like, kind of like company out of that. Right. I mean, it's just too easy to like take a step into that lane. And so I think there's a lot of companies that, and again, time will tell, because I think any name that we named out, we don't really know. We don't really know the internals. We don't know what they're doing from a data collection perspective. We don't know what they're doing from a kind of like a proprietary perspective. So I think it'd be a lot of guessing. That would be unfair, and potentially make us look really bad in a couple months. But the core of it is, I look at it, for example, like you go look at kind of GitHub and GitHub Copilot, right? And you look at a lot of kind of like general kind of like code writing assistant tooling out there, and you have to ask yourself, okay, what is it that GitHub can't do, right? That you are doing for this that is really kind of like, what can they really not do? And it's not like, look, large companies move slow and they have a hard time innovating. There's all these things that are all true, right? And you have to move a whole bunch of things. But like, if you really core it and say, well, if it's a data differentiator, they have more data. If it's a, kind of like a power or kind of GPU differentiator, they have more, like you have to really think about what's going to be the differentiator for there. Now, one that I always like a lot is the multi-data source world, right? It's really unlikely for teams or large companies to go to an adjacent product and also integrate data from that product. There's no motivation to do it, right? And so anytime you are looking at some of these products that sit one layer above multiple data sources or multiple kind of different kind of like streams, now it gets really interesting because it's unlikely, not saying it's impossible, but it's unlikely for them to want to do that kind of integration or jump into all the work that is necessary to adopt multiple different kind of like data channels or whatever for that. So that's a little bit more philosophical. So I'm not going to name names, but like that's kind of how I would like frame the problem.
Got it. Thoughts, Maria or Jason?
I'm gonna similar, like it's important to look at where in the market you believe there will be a sustaining business built. So in the YLabs case, we monitor machine learning models and data and generative AI. So we live in the AI tool chain. So when we were starting the company, we spent a lot of time thinking and interviewing data science teams to really figure out what's the pain point. And one of the biggest pain points they had is once they put model in production, how do I make sure that it's not drifting and it's not doing stuff that I didn't train it on? And we looked into the adjacent space of application performance monitoring in the software world and saw that massive companies were being built there, like Datadog, Splunk, New Relic. And we thought that, that would be replicated in the AI tool chain. So really thinking about there will always be areas where the cloud providers, the tech giants will grow into because they have to check the box for their customers. But as Diego was saying, there's the multiple data sources is one trend. The other one is every single organization using AI for their purposes wants to use the best possible model or technology or framework for their use case, and no one big company provides best of breed. So a lot of enterprises would start on OpenAI, but then they would move to open source models because they want to load their proprietary data. So really be thoughtful about where is there money to be made in the long term, and can you think about where big companies in that space have been built in adjacent verticals or spaces.
And maybe I'll be the provocative one and name a name because I think Google has done some amazing things and continues to do amazing things. And I know I'm looking forward to a lot of their upcoming announcements, but they seem to have lost a lot of the momentum that they probably could have or should have had based on the amount of research acumen they had in the deep learning and machine learning spaces. And so I feel like they're and to take that example and kind of writ large, where I won't name names of where I've seen companies have erosion of capabilities and defensibility is typically when they are not willing to kind of cannibalize their own resources, product lines, and businesses for reinventing themselves going forward. So it's as I think we'll have a chance to get into more, I think speed of iteration and ability to jump into new areas and leverage new technologies is so critical and becoming more critical as the pace of innovation increases. And so the erosion can happen that much faster if you're not willing to jump onto new things and reinvent yourself as a result of that.
And interestingly, that can be opportunities for startups. Exactly. Who might think that the big company, has got this. But, maybe they don't. But to your point, Diego, you really don't know. The example I always like to think of is Kodak. They were a huge company for decades, but then, were usurped by many competitors when digital photography came into being. I think, in that case, it's like, well, they were an older company and they failed to innovate. But actually, in their case, there's evidence to suggest that they had a digital camera as early as 1975. So that's kind of, particularly painful in that regard. So, I guess maybe the the lesson is that everybody's vulnerable. Whether it's Yahoo or things that we'll see in the future with OpenAI, you know, all of these things are in play. Well, let's dig in a little bit more to things that you guys have thought about, other entrepreneurs have been thinking about, in terms of how they form a defensible moat, especially early on in their existence. One topic I wanted to start with, because I get this a lot at Madrona Labs, is I want to get your guys' thoughts on patents. I have a lot of entrepreneurs come to us and talk about the patents that they filed, and how now they're ready to talk to the world about their concept because, you know, they have several provisionals, you know, going down the pipeline. What are you guys' thoughts on patents for early stage companies in particular? And when, if at all, should, you know, a patent strategy be executed?
Sure, I can I'll give it a shot here. So I think, like, you know, the world of patents, like, there's kind of two modes. There's defensive and then there's kind of offensive. And I think a startup thinking that they have an offensive patent strategy is kind of ridiculous. Like, I mean, like, you don't have enough money. Maybe, okay, maybe you did get it funded in some insane way, and I guess some of them do have a lot of money, but like, having an offensive patent strategy is virtually impossible at an early stage of a startup. And so really what your like patents, you know, really can get you in certain situations is defensibility in case somebody came for you and you said, no, look, I already have this, you can't do anything about it. And honestly, even mounting a defense like inside that patent strategy, so you know, that's the kind of like, you know, that's how I look at it. So that's like my perspective is like defensiveness in certain cases might be useful. At that point, it's the, you know, risk reward ratio. Like, what are you doing? What are you like patenting initially? I see a world where, like, you know, 80-90% of startups like move off of the first product that they started with, or like, you know, kind of like evolve it so much that, you know, potentially half of those patents, if not more, all that money you spend is out the drain. But in certain areas, like, they might be worth it. And like, I'm not an expert in bio and in kind of like any of the kind of like life sciences stuff where I think they matter more, or at least it's kind of like a, you know, everything or nothing type thing. But, you know, software patents in general, and a lot of the machine learning stuff, which is algorithms, which are not really even, they're almost not even copyrightable. You know, it's a hard game to play. I kind of discount. I don't give them any consideration whatsoever, to be honest.
I think I would kind of add on to that and extend it maybe a bit, where I feel like the pace of innovation is just so fast that it's hard for that ROI to you know, come to fruition. And whether your product changes or the market changes or the technology changes, it seems like, especially in the early stage, because your time is so valuable and your focus is one of your critical assets that you have. And so if you're going to spend some of that precious focus and energy on patents, and it can be a pretty lightweight process if you find a good partner, but then again, it's like there's a million things like that doing a startup, where you can kind of make a story for why it makes sense here, but when you add all those up, then you get cut by 1,000 knives.
If I need to chime in, you know, we at Y Labs have played with the idea. We have ideas of what should be patentable, but it's to Jason's point, it is such a huge cost of like everyone's time. So maybe one day we'll patent. Right now, I think our biggest internal conversation is how much should we put into the open source versus how much should be in our platform, which is not open source. But on the patent side, at my previous company, Cloudflare, we did file quite a bit of patents. A lot of them were around cryptography, and very specialized things that built moats. But that was way after product market fit, and I found them to be a really good strategy for kind of employee motivation and incentive. People loved, engineers loved like sitting down with our patent lawyer once a quarter, once every year, and really like brainstorming their ideas and then seeing their names on those provisional patents that were getting filed. But it does require quite a bit of infrastructure, unless you happen to be an IP lawyer and can just do it all yourself. It's expensive and it's time consuming.
It is a feather in your cap. I remember at Microsoft getting the little cubes. The more you had, the bigger the stack you could put on your desk, the better. So yeah. So it sounds like the collective wisdom from the group, though, is wait on patents. Maybe not the best first thing to do when you want to go tell the world about your idea. Well, cool. So let's kind of delve into some of the deeper topics around, especially for machine learning and AI startups, around data and machine learning algorithms. I think for several years I've been talking with entrepreneurs about the importance of data and data moats, and that generally machine learning technology is commoditized quickly. Spread throughout the community quickly. Is that your guys' sense as well? And are there any aspects to machine learning algorithms or other kinds of deep numerical or optimization algorithms or whatever that feel like they could be a moat for an early stage company? Doesn't sound like it.
I think data, I'll take the data piece. I think that generative AI has eroded a bit the value of data in that, because you have these models that are distillations of enormous quantities of data, kind of general purpose data that is either accessible, but the compute is so prohibitive. It's kind of leveled the playing field in a great respect. Now you do have the fine tuning or RAG where you're trying to adapt a general purpose generative AI model into a particular domain, but it's unclear whether the static notion of a data moat is really the right mind frame, or it's actually more the data pipeline that you're interested in. I heard one of the head of products at GitHub Copilot was saying, and we heard this on the panel previously, of just, if you can capture a market or be an early mover and then have that stream of data from usage, like that's much more valuable than a static data set that is going to get out of date and is not applicable to this exact scenario. So I think it's more about getting access to the data stream and doing that through iteration and being laser focused on customer use cases and niches and building out from there that is a better approach than just kind of the classic notion of a static data silo.
Mm-hmm. Maria, Diego, thoughts on the data moat and how it's changed and evolved, particularly with Gen AI?
I was hoping that Diego was going to chime in, given the history of algorithmia and how much he knows about algorithms in particular, but he's being shy.
I'm happy to jump in. No, I think I think you always want to look for some sort of network effect, right? You want to look for a network effect in data. You want to look for a network effect in distribution. You want to look for a network effect in adoption. These flywheels are how established businesses get grown, right? And you need different flywheels at different stages of the business. And so I think the data one is an important one when that data is the one that is actually allowing you to provide the service or what you're doing in a more effective or in a more efficient way. In some cases, that data moat can actually, to Jason's point, like by doing some level of fine tuning kind of adoption, you might be able to do smaller models. So you're now talking about being able to deliver the exact same thing at a much cheaper cost and a much faster latency because you can kind of do derivatives of those models. In other cases, it actually might give you capabilities of these models, these foundational models that other people, don't have. I think one of the most interesting, in my opinion, is like if you look at Midjourney, right? I mean, we have all decided that we're going to go like be labelers and kind of tuners for their models for the rest of history, and they're charging us for that for the right.
It's brilliant.
They're charging us for the right to do that, right? And it's awesome, and I'll never complain. I'll give them money every day. It's like so good, right? And but like let's not be mistaken about like what we're doing, right? Like they've created a system that has created a data flywheel for them, where we've kind of like improved and improved and improved on their models. And I don't know if any, like, I mean, I've played with the others. They're not as good. They're not even close to as good. Right. Yeah. And so like you can start creating these advantages. And so as we think of a world of many foundational models, and especially with the advent of all these open source models that people can use, your data plus those open source models tend to be what the differentiator is. Right. And so the question then becomes, is it your data? Is it data from your network? Is it data from your clientele, or how you're actually building that? But like, this is how you can go create real differentiators, right? Like the recipe, how you put together the open source models, how you use your data, how you combine it, that will create differentiation. Is it the only way to create differentiation? I don't think so, but it's a very strong one that you can see a lot of companies kind of like, sticking to it.
Yeah.
Given that fine tuning in general, though, one of the awesome things about it is it requires so little data compared to training a model from scratch, certainly. Do you think it's still a credible defensibility story?
Well,
when speaking to an investor, say.
Yeah. So I think the misnomer here is like the quantity versus quality. So like, sure, you need less quantity, but the quality that you use has to go way up, and your understanding of what that quality looks like, and being able to select examples, and being able to, or generate the samples from a synthetic data set, like that, like the few examples you pick are so much more important. Like previously, I call it, I don't know, it's just laughing now that I call it like classic machine learning, even though it's like, like it's like yesterday. Like it was quantity, right? It was definitely quantity of a quantity. Let's throw as much data as possible. Let's collect as much as possible. Let's go let the models figure it out. Now it's about sniping data sets so that you can do it. But that effort of doing that and selecting the right samples is just as, in my opinion, as credible or as difficult, right? One's a collection task and trying to generate. The other one's about being like very precise about the samples that you're using.
Yeah.
One thing to add is it's worth thinking about where does this fine-tuning becomes really important. Are there, for example, industries, heavily regulated industries like healthcare, like financial services, where many companies have in-house data science teams, but the majority of companies, they're just not focused. That is not their core expertise, but they want to get the benefits from those AI systems, and they need highly specialized, highly tuned models that are also guardrailed, and they can't just go and use OpenAI. So there are real businesses that can be built there, similar to some of the vertical software companies serving healthcare, serving, say, sales teams, and so forth.
And maybe that jogged a memory of mine is maybe it's not the data so much going into the models and fine tuning that's where the mode is. It's the data coming out of the model, which is the evaluation problem, which was touched on in the last panel, just like how difficult that is, how much domain expertise that requires, and you have to do it in a much more dynamic online fashion. So maybe the like data mode kind of inverts to the evaluation mode, right? I'm just kind of riffing here.
Yeah, no, all good. In the last panel, they were talking about the hamburgers and buns and, the meat and so forth. I find myself talking with entrepreneurs about a moat sandwich. Basically a number of layers of moats. It's not just one, thing anymore, like data or patents or proprietary algorithms. It's a number of strategies stacked on top. Jason, you mentioned domain knowledge. Say more about that. I mean, how important and differentiable and defensible do you think domain knowledge is?
Yeah, I think it's critical. but not so much for just the ability to, understand a problem, speak the lingo, kind of figure out what problems need to be solved, which are valuable and important parts. But really, the critical aspect of domain knowledge is your ability to really talk to and converse with customers and users and understand their pain in a very realistic and fine-grained way. Because maybe one way to describe it is that I really like is the difference between product market fit and close to product market fit can be incredibly minute, but still, the outcomes are dramatically different. And so your ability to close that gap between close to product market fit and product market fit is your ability to understand your customer and your user, and that comes, I think, through domain expertise in large part, unless you're one of the brilliant and talented people who can kind of do that without that understanding and expertise. So I think there's like the two halves of it: you're understanding your user and being able to actually deliver solutions that are workable with that domain expertise.
So maybe another way to articulate that is that founder market fit, which is a term we use a lot around Madrona Labs, is sort of more important than ever.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So what about I am hearing a lot about the importance of usability and really tight, as you were saying, Jason, product market fit. It seems like that's in theory always been something that's important, but I sort of get the sense that that's becoming like really paramount now, given that LLMs and Gen AI has become so commoditized that it's really going to come down to how delightful your product is in user experience. And maybe that was kind of a second order thing in the past. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
The way I think about it is that usability, before things moved so fast with generative AI, it was a better understood problem of kind of what usability even means. And so on the one hand, generative AI typically makes it, on the outset, it's so usable because you just have to type in what you want and boom, there's the output. But when you get to the nitty gritty and the reality of it, like nobody really knows like how to make these systems usable at larger and true production scale. Like the evaluation problem that we were talking about is, I think usability in terms of evaluation is nobody knows the answer to this problem. And so I think usability, the reason why it's so critical now, to your point, more so than ever, is because the space has evolved and nobody knows what usability even looks like when the problem, like the problems that we have and users have changed so much and so quickly.
Maybe I'll chime in with some of our experience at WELL Labs around usability. So there are two aspects that are very important when you're building your product. The first one is AI practitioners. They like to discover things and try things, similar to how developers operate. They don't like to be told what to do or sold to. So it is really important that you have a product that allows an AI practitioner to get their hands on your product in a risk-free way. So what do I mean by risk-free way? When it comes to AI and data, majority of the models are running on highly proprietary data that may include PII and other stuff that the InfoSec department is really, really careful and wants to avoid leakage. So there are a whole bunch of restrictions. So if you're building a product that is targeting not a consumer kind of individual user, but more of an enterprise user, you want to give them an experience where they don't have to go through procurement process or InfoSec approval in order to see the value of your product, whether it's an LLM-driven application or, in our case, it's a tool that is used to monitor those types of applications and so forth. But you're dealing with typically you're dealing with a practitioner who hasn't bought software before, for example, it's hard for them and they won't swipe a credit card as easily as maybe you projected. And then the second thing is privacy, security is a real big consideration.
I think of that sometimes as trialability. Not a real word, but you know, the more trialable your stuff is, the better. Great. Okay. So, by the way, to the audience, if you have questions, please chime into, you know, to the chat. As we just have a few minutes left and want to be able to answer any additional questions. So, what would you guys tell budding entrepreneurs, you know, who have a really, you know, cool language LLM application, but that kind of falls under the, you know, under the you know, moniker of like, you know, Google or Microsoft or Facebook or whoever could do this? What would you tell them in order to, you know, help them not walk off a cliff, but actually position themselves in a way that in this day and age would help them get traction?
Maybe I would tell them not to worry about the big incumbents, because I feel like I've been hearing this my whole life of just, oh, Microsoft, you know, is going to build that, or, you know, whatever the big incumbent is. But typically, if you look at it, their ability to iterate quickly and identify and solve problems and create products, and especially for niches, is not historically very good. So on the other hand, your ability to actually deliver a product, you know, the only way it's still hard, right? Generative AI has not changed the physics of how hard it is to build a startup, you know, work with customers, build a product, scale it, go to market. And so you just have to keep that laser focus on who your user is, get that as narrow as possible, deliver, you know, understand their problem, iterate with them, deliver, make your first 5 users happy, and before you move on from that. And it's in doing that you will truly be, if you iterate quickly, you'll be able to build differentiation iteratively with your users, and learn to understand them, evolve with them. And by the end of it, if you continue to follow that thread, then you'll be on a pace that the big incumbents can't follow you. So that's I think it's such a wise advice to just focus on the user, put your blinders on, don't worry about competition. I mean, I think you can make the counter argument for how you can think about competition, watch out for it, but that would be more in the appendix of my argument. So I still really believe strongly in what focus on the user and customer.
Yeah, I love that. Just go and execute. Because I do think, you know, a lot of folks are kind of sitting on the sidelines. You know, I agree with you. My whole career too, I've heard, oh, you know, the big tech companies could just do that. But you know, they can't do everything. And a really cool, innovative product can still break through. So I think that's a great message for entrepreneurs. Maria and Diego, any nuances you'd put on that or disagree with?
I generally agree with Jason here. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of times, I never counted them, but there was a lot. Every time they were like, oh, Amazon's going to build this or Microsoft's going to go build this. And I'm like, sure, then we just all, like, every VC should quit their job because Amazon's just going to go build it. And every entrepreneur should never build a piece of sign. We should just all go work there. And it's just not true, right? It's just like a factually not true that, you know, these like, those organizations, for a bunch of different reasons, right? Like innovation doesn't always come from the big companies. These are greatly innovative companies that build a bunch of stuff. And, you know, if you go look at, you know, Microsoft is actually extremely good at waiting until somebody else has figured out a market and then coming in with the full force of Microsoft and seeing if they can kind of saturate it and take it over. And they've been very effective with that, but they haven't really been like opening, brand new things. It's not a knock on it. I love Microsoft. I used to work there. And so, you know, I think like, it's exactly what Jason said. Like, you know, I think the question is, so I think there's a stage before product market fit, which is that I look at, which is what I call problem market fit. Is this really a problem?
Yeah.
Right. Is this, so should this company exist? right? That's one of the philosophies that I kind of like always look at is like, you know, there's cool innovation, there's cool tech, there's cool features, there's cool products. Is this a company? Is this a company that should exist? And why should, you know, why should something like this exist? And should you kind of go build out it? And then if you can kind of get to that, this is a problem that's worth solving, and there's a company that should exist to go solve it. It's exactly what Jason said, blinders to that conversation. Don't be blinders to the market. That would be a terrible idea. You know, but like, you know, blinders to that conversation of like, yeah, sure, everybody else can build it. Great. You know, like, you know, if you're always looking at the competition, you're only aiming to where they're aiming versus beyond.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything to add, Maria?
Really well said by both of them. I'll just add maybe a third aspect, that a lot of the large companies, they try to solve their own problem, or as I said earlier, like check a box for customer requirements so they could be more competitive in the large RFPs and so forth that they run. But oftentimes, especially in AI, Gen AI space, they are very open to partnering and to like really looking what else is out there, and are being very flexible. And we just saw, you know, AWS or Amazon make a huge investment in Anthropic. They've been working with Anthropic for 2-3 years prior. Same with the Microsoft OpenAI. And of course, those are very large, massive investments, but it is happening around the ecosystem where the platforms are moving so fast. They want to fill in the gaps by partnering the companies, and they're less focused on necessarily like acquiring and integrating, because they want to build the ecosystem. That's how their own product advances. They can sell more of their core revenue generator. There's just one other aspect. Everything else, I agree with, like being very focused on the user, doing your homework. Like we spoke to 36 data science teams before we started Y Labs to really figure out what's the pain point and what people are willing to pay for. And so do that homework. Don't skip that step. Diego framed it really well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love all of that stuff. Go forth and execute, but do your homework. Awesome. I see one question here. Is there another way to demonstrate trialability for sensitive data? We've been jumping through hoops with CAC surveys. Currently, we've been giving potential customers a trial account so they can play with mock data, but wondering if there's a better way to show that. I guess, yeah, please chime in if you have thoughts.
I just have to say that we had to become SOC 2 Type 2 compliant way before, in my wildest dreams, I wanted to deal with that. And actually, we're in the midst of redoing it for the 3rd year as a 4-year-old company. So those CAIQ surveys and just dealing with InfoSec are very time consuming. We did something similar. We gave people demo data sets and then assured them, gave them assurances, talked to the InfoSec teams, but it is a hard problem in our space. So think about what in your product allows people to preserve privacy. What are the protections that you can give them? How can you de-risk it? And don't shy away from talking to InfoSec. But I would say in our space, you may end up having to invest in those process certifications, security certifications way sooner than in the past. It's painful. Start early, document your processes. There's a really cool Madrona company called StrikeGraph that everyone should talk to if you want help.
Started at MBL.
Oh, that's right. Go MBL. See?
Yeah, woohoo.
And they're awesome. Very helpful.
I think the one of the things that, and this was a nuance that it took me a while to figure out, but especially if you're selling into enterprises or you're building something for enterprises, which is the difference between a proof of value and a proof of concept. So, you know, a proof of concept is like, does the concept of what I'm building work? And in that case, you do not need to show anything with their private data. You should be able to prove the concept with the data, you know, some mock data, some fake data. This is how it works. Maybe you have different data sets to kind of just show that it's not like really built for that. Once you move into like, oh, we're going to show it how it works with your data, now you're talking about a proof of value. It's a second stage, right? And yes, to Maria's point, like once you're in that, there's no way around it, right? Essentially, what these enterprises want to do is they want to third party the risk of them giving you data, right? So they want to know it's not their problem if something happens, and they want to know that you're protected and you have insurance and all these things because their insurance requires it, right? And so this is really just a risk passing the baton on, right? And being like, oh no, that's your problem now, and it's your insurance, and whoever's going to go take care of it. And so you should just think about it from that framing. But you don't need that data in a lot of cases. I'm not saying it's always, it's not black and white, to prove the concept of, you know, what you're building or what you're operationalizing.
Awesome. All great advice. You're so right, Maria, that especially if you're, you know, ingesting, you know, corporate data of any kind, I mean, you really have to have your ducks in a row really early. So if any folks out there have companies where you'll be ingesting your customers' data, you know, get in front of that right away. I think that that's all the time we have. Thanks so much, Maria, Diego, Jason. Really appreciate your thoughts and insight and advice, and look forward to the next session, which is on Friday afternoon. Henry, were you going to say anything about that, or I think we're all good?
You already did it. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah. So Launchable participants, we'll see you all Friday afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.